I never thought my life would come to this, posting my mess on Reddit for strangers to read, but I need to let it out somewhere because my friends, real friends, are tired of hearing about it. It all started years ago when I was 17 and my sister Kayla decided that she couldn't stand my existence anymore. We were never close, but I never imagined she'd do something so cruel. She spread a rumor to my parents that I was secretly selling drugs at school. No one questioned her story. Without a second thought, I was kicked out of the house. At first, I thought there must be a misunderstanding. I told my parents I had no idea what Kayla was talking about. I'd never even touched marijuana, let alone harder stuff. But they looked at me like I was some junkie. My dad yelled about how he wouldn't have a criminal under his roof. My mom cried and asked how I could betray their trust. Meanwhile, Kayla watched silently from the corner, her arms crossed, a smug look on her face. When I tried to protest, my father shoved a duffel bag into my arms and told me to disappear. I left with what little dignity I had. A friend from school let me crash on his couch, and his parents took pity on me. They were good people who believed me. They even helped me get a part-time job so I could save for my own place. I sometimes snuck back to my old neighborhood at night just to see if I could figure out why Kayla had done this. Of course, she never gave me a chance. I was persona non grata at my own home. So I kept my head down, worked hard, and focused on surviving. Months passed, then a year. I managed to graduate high school with decent grades, which felt like a miracle given the stress. The day I walked across that stage, I looked into the crowd. I didn't spot my parents or Kayla. I shouldn't have been surprised, but it still hurt. That night, my friend's dad handed me a card with a small amount of money inside. He said he was proud. I nearly broke down in gratitude. That support was a reminder that not everyone believed I was worthless. Determined, I decided to keep going and prove them all wrong. Without any financial help from my family, I found a job as a server. I worked double shifts when possible and eventually moved into a cheap apartment. It wasn't luxurious, but it was mine. I kept in touch with my friends' parents who checked in on me occasionally. I tried calling my own parents a couple of times, hoping to clear the air. Each time, my dad hung up and my mom muttered something about trusting Kayla's word over mine. That rejection stung, but I refused to let it break me. I was entirely determined to build a life independently. College wasn't an option right away. I needed more savings, so I enrolled in community college part-time. Over the next 2 years, I juggled classes and work. My grades weren't spectacular, but I passed. I managed to transfer to a state university with a scholarship that covered part of my tuition. By the time I was 20, I had enough financial aid and loans to go full-time. I dove into my studies, focusing on business. I had a vague dream of opening my own place one day. The idea of success, of proving everyone wrong, was what so badly kept me motivated. During this time, Kayla was apparently thriving. She attended a private college and bragged on social media about her fancy internship. My parents beamed in her photos, looking like the proudest family in the world. I felt a sting of resentment, but I reminded myself that one day I'd have something to brag about too. I was forging my own path. Eventually, I rented a small off-campus apartment. I found a decent roommate, studied hard, and managed to maintain a B average. I even started a small side hustle tutoring classmates, which helped me cover some of my living expenses. I was 22 when I finally heard from my parents again. My phone rang late at night. Seeing my dad's name made my stomach drop. I considered ignoring it, but curiosity got the better of me. He sounded tired, older than I remembered. He said my mom was sick. They'd just found out she had a serious heart condition. My first reaction was concern, of course, but then I remembered how they'd thrown me out. My dad asked if I could come visit. He mentioned that Kayla insisted I'd moved far away. I told him I'd seriously think about it. I hung up and spent the night tossing and turning. My parents hadn't been there when I needed them most. They believed Kayla's lies without hesitation. Now, because my mom was sick, they wanted me back in their lives. Part of me felt guilty. If my mom was truly in danger, should I hold a grudge? But another part remembered how badly they'd hurt me. I thought about it for days. Finally, I decided to go home, but only to see my mom in the hospital. I wasn't about to move back in or pretend everything was fine at all. When I arrived, Kayla was sitting in the waiting area. She looked surprised, maybe even annoyed that I'd come. She tried to make small talk, acting as if nothing had happened. I ignored her and went straight to my mom's room. Seeing her so frail made my anger waver, but then she opened her eyes, saw me, and started crying. She apologized for everything, saying she was misled by Kayla's convincing story. She claimed she regretted letting me go. I listened, but I didn't offer comfort or forgiveness. I told her I was there to see if she was okay. My dad arrived soon after. He seemed relieved to see me, but there was no warm hug. He tried to explain that Kayla said she caught me dealing, that she'd found hidden bags of pills in my drawer. I asked if they ever bothered to check. They looked guilty. My mom mumbled that they trusted Kayla because she'd always been a straight-A student. My dad admitted he'd been suspicious of me for a while, though he had no proof. I stood there, hands in my pockets, feeling a whirlwind of emotions. Mostly, I felt so painfully betrayed all over again. I visited my mom regularly for the next week, but I avoided Kayla. She tried to corner me in the hallway once, saying she felt bad about what happened. I glared at her and kept walking. Her apology meant nothing to me. She'd destroyed my life with that lie, and she never admitted it until now. My dad asked me to come home for a family dinner when my mom was discharged, claiming she needed the support. I hesitated, but part of me wanted closure. So I agreed to step into that house again, though I deeply dreaded the confrontation. The place looked the same, except my room was now Kayla's study space. My posters were gone, replaced by her academic awards. I felt a pang of anger. My dad served dinner, and my mom tried making small talk. Kayla fidgeted, unable to meet my eyes. Finally, I asked point blank, why had she lied? She mumbled something about me always getting attention for being the nice one. She claimed I overshadowed her socially, even if her grades were better. She was jealous. That was all it took to ruin my life. I felt a surge of rage I couldn't suppress. I slammed my fork down, demanding to know if that was her entire justification. She flinched and nodded. My parents sat there looking miserable, but I had no sympathy. They let her do this to me. I stood up and told them that I didn't come here to reconcile, but to deliver a message. I was done being the scapegoat. They begged me to calm down. My mom started crying about her heart condition, saying the stress might kill her. I felt a flicker of guilt, but the anger was stronger. I left the table right then and walked out. I stayed away for several weeks after that. My phone blew up with messages from my dad, asking if I'd come visit my mom, reminding me she was fragile. Kayla even tried emailing me, but I never responded. I had too much bitterness bottled up. Meanwhile, I was nearing graduation. The plan was to move to a different city and start a new job. Through a career fair, I landed a position at a promising startup. It felt like a big step toward leaving my past behind. Part of me wanted to cut off my family and never look back. But as the weeks went by, I heard from extended relatives. My aunt called, saying my mom's condition was worsening. She pleaded with me to at least make peace before moving. I felt torn. Despite everything, she was still my mother, and she was dying. Could I live with myself if I just walked away? After agonizing over it, I decided to visit once more, on my own terms. I wouldn't be manipulated, though. I went to the house, found my mom alone in the living room, and told her we needed to talk without anyone else interrupting ever again. She was pale, breathing heavily, and I could see the toll this illness was taking on her. But I didn't budge. I told her how alone I'd felt, how they'd never given me a chance to defend myself. I demanded to know if she truly believed I was some sort of criminal. She shook her head, tears in her eyes, saying she'd been overwhelmed by Kayla's evidence. I asked her why she never reached out in the years since, and she just sobbed that she was too ashamed. It was pathetic. I felt no sympathy, only an absolute cold resolve. I spelled out what I wanted, an acknowledgement from them that Kayla lied, and a written apology they would share with the relatives who believed I was a junkie. My mom nodded weakly, saying she would do whatever it took. I told her to rest, that I would wait for it in writing. Then I left. I didn't see my dad or Kayla on the way out, which was fine by me. I drove away feeling a mix of triumph and bitterness. I knew I might never truly forgive them, but at least they'd have to set the record straight. A week later, I received a typed letter signed by both of my parents. It stated that Kayla had fabricated the entire story about me selling drugs. They apologized and asked all extended family to forgive them for their mistake. They mailed copies to my aunts, uncles, and grandparents. I felt a grim satisfaction reading those words. It wouldn't erase what happened, but it was a start. I didn't speak to Kayla again. She sent me a text saying she was sorry, that she regretted her actions, and she wanted to rebuild our relationship. I immediately deleted it without replying. As for my mom, I learned that her condition was indeed dire. She might need a transplant soon. My dad kept calling, saying mom needed emotional support, that she wanted to see me before I moved away. But I had nothing left to give. I visited her in the hospital one last time, brought her flowers, and told her I wished her no harm, but that our relationship was shattered. She cried, begging me not to leave, promising to make up for everything. I just told her long, painful, final goodbye. My heart was heavy, but my choice was made. I moved to a city several hours away and threw myself into my new job. The startup atmosphere was intense but rewarding. I learned quickly and started earning decent money. Eventually, I found a modest place to live, made some new friends, and built a life free from my family's shadow. Whenever guilt tried creeping in, I reminded myself of their deeply hurtful betrayal. I reminded myself of the lonely nights when I was homeless, the tears I shed when I realized my parents trusted a lie over me. That kept me focused on moving forward and never looking back. 2 years passed. I advanced in the company, becoming a project manager. One day, out of the blue, I got a call from my aunt. My mom's health had declined severely, and she was on a waiting list for a heart transplant. My aunt said my parents wanted me to visit, even if just to say goodbye in case things went south. I felt my chest tighten, but I also felt that old anger simmering. Why should I rush to her bedside when she'd never been there for me? Still, a part of me felt I should at least check. I took a couple of days off and drove back. The hospital room felt suffocating. My dad was there, looking haggard. Kayla stood in the corner, silent as a ghost. My mom looked like she was fading away, hooked up to machines. She brightened when she saw me, but I kept my distance. My dad tried to pull me aside, begging for reconciliation, claiming my mom needed peace of mind. I told him I owed them nothing. I'd come only to see for myself if she was still alive. No, I didn't word it kindly. I was done pretending. My mother tried to speak, voice trembling. She said she wanted my forgiveness, that her final wish was to see me reunited with the family. Kayla tried to chime in, but I silenced her with a glare. I told my mom that she'd lost the right to ask that of me. I reminded her of the years I spent struggling, the accusations that nearly ruined my future. I told her I had no intention of rejoining their family circle. My dad started shouting, calling me ungrateful and cruel. I told him he was reaping what he'd sown all these years. Her health deteriorated rapidly after that. My aunt kept me updated. I refused to visit again. Some might call that heartless, but I saw it as the outcome they created. The damage was done long before her illness. She passed away a month later. My dad left me voicemails, calling me every name under the sun, blaming me for her death. I blocked his number. I had tried to be civil. They wanted me to pretend the past never happened. I couldn't. I wouldn't. The funeral came and went, and I didn't attend. They had made their bed long ago. To my shock, after her death, Kayla reached out again. She sent a long email saying she didn't expect me to forgive her, but she wanted to let me know she was miserable and filled with regret. She said our dad had turned cold toward her too, blaming her for my estrangement. She claimed she hadn't realized the full consequences of her lie until now. She ended by asking if we could at least talk. I stared at that message, remembering every single hurt she caused. I deleted the email. Revenge. Sometimes is just letting them suffer completely in silence. Over time, my life flourished. I got promoted again, purchased a small condo, and traveled with friends. I occasionally saw updates about Kayla. She struggled to find stable work, apparently overshadowed by her own reputation for lying and manipulative behavior. My dad fell into debt, possibly from medical bills. None of it bothered me. In fact, it felt like poetic justice. They had each other, but they'd destroyed their own unity long ago. I found love with someone who valued my worth, and we built a supportive relationship. I no longer felt that gnawing emptiness I once so deeply carried. Sometimes I think about how different things might have been if Kayla hadn't lied, if my parents had believed me, if they'd given me a chance. But dwelling on that changes nothing. My life now is the product of my own resilience, and I'm proud of it. I won't deny the bitterness still lingers in some corners of my heart, Yet it fuels me, reminds me that I can stand on my own. People often ask if I regret not reconciling before my mom passed. Honestly, no. She made her choice when she fully believed Kayla's lie over her own child. Now, my dad sometimes sends letters, each filled with guilt-tripping and accusations. He claims I'm selfish for ignoring family obligations. But family is more than blood. Family is trust, loyalty, and compassion. They showed me none of that when I was 17, desperate and alone. Kayla, from what I hear, still tries to contact me occasionally, but I've moved on. I have my own circle of loved ones. I won't let their pleas pull me back into a toxic cycle. They had their chances to be a family. They blew it. I chose myself, and I've never, ever regretted it. That's my story. No neat bow at the end. No miracle reconciliation. I survived their betrayal, built my own life, and refused to let them leech off my success or my emotions. My mom is gone, and I never got closure, but honestly, I'm at peace with that. My dad and Kayla can live with the consequences of their lies and cruelty. I don't owe them forgiveness, and I won't pretend otherwise. Sometimes cutting ties is the only way to heal. If they wanted a different outcome, they should have considered the cost before discarding me like trash in cold blood.